welcome again to another episode of Keep the Conversation Going. We are on episode 5. And today, as you can see, we've got some guests with us, some Swansea alum. And the topic of conversation is going to be creating safe spaces. Just as another introduction, I am one of your co-hosts, Natasha Moera, and I am with
Chido and your other co-host. For 5 whole episodes, actually. It's been a while.
It really has. So I will allow our panelists to introduce themselves. So pretty much telling us their name, when they left Swansea, and what they studied while they were in Swansea.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel, and I have graduated last year in 2020. And I have majored in accounting and finance for my bachelor degree, and I'm currently studied for international accounting and financial management at the University of Glasgow. Yeah.
So my name is Namil. I graduated in 2019. I studied economics and finance. Right now I'm a consultant at KPMG in Dubai.
Yeah. Ooh, cool.
Hi everyone. My name is Ayo Sunmaid. I graduated from Swansea in the year 2018. I studied accounting and finance. I think like everybody on the panel too. Currently, I work as an actuarial analyst, so also known as a pricing analyst in layman's terms. And I work at Aviva currently, so in insurance.
So good. Personally, I think I would love to hear from all of you before we even head into today's discussion, how you all got the roles that you currently got. All of those are quite envious, roles that people would love to have. So maybe if you just take us down your career journey applications, how was that experience for the three of you? Rachel, if you'd like to start, and then we'll go to Namil and Ayo.
Okay. For me, I just introduced that I have got an offer from EY as an auditor and would start this September. I think, thanks. The most important thing for me is the experience at Swansea University to be in both international student ambassador and student ambassador. They give me those experience helped me a lot to improve my English and also get in touch with the other people to learn from them. Like Chido, we met. We have a lot of work experience as well. So another thing I think is to participate in volunteering activity. That is so important to get a job because you can mention a lot of volunteering experience during the interview. So yeah, that's my insight. Thanks.
I think right after uni, I took a couple of months off and I actually had a business running at the moment, something that I started when I was in uni, second year of uni. So that was interesting. And then in my final year of uni, I ended up breaking my hand and things got a little hectic in Swansea. Yeah, so that was fun. And basically, so as a result of that, my bandwidth was pretty spent. So I had to focus on exams as well as my business. And then I made this decision to not apply in the UK because I realized how thin my chances were. And I guess I made an executive decision to just not do it because I knew for a fact, I had a lot of learning to do before I was confident in myself when it came to the value that I can add as a resource in a company. And then what I ended up doing was I took a few months off. I worked on my business and I worked on a lot of things. And I wanted to figure out what I really like to do. And that really helped me understand that I had a taste for finance. And then I did economics and finance and I did specialize in finance in my final year. And my career journey began with an internship at KPMG. Luckily, in those 3 months, I got to work with the right people that were amazing when it came to mentoring me. And I think I was extremely enthusiastic because it was my first experience in a professional setting. So I would just go in every day with a bunch of questions to ask. And just with that whole attitude just to learn and absorb as much as I could, because I was getting access to resources and information that I wouldn't usually have access to, and I was just trying to make the most of it. I wasn't thinking about the job at the end of it. I was just trying to make the most of my internship, which kind of translated into the best that I could do, at least. And then I ended up getting an offer in March. This is so funny because I got an offer on the 24th of Feb 2020, and I had to leave the country for 2 weeks to get my work visa. So I go back home to India for 2 weeks, and then my flight was on the 15th of March, and I come here. 2 days later, they closed all the airports in India because of Corona.
That
And
is crazy.
and I come here, and I had to do my so there's an induction. I had to do my induction online for the first time, and like the way I started working, since I started working, I've been working from home. I was so focused on doing my best during my probation that somehow I ended up going above and beyond, and I ended up getting promoted in September. So that was crazy. Like that was insanely lucky, I suppose. I don't know. And so technically now I'm a consultant. So I think like one thing that I really want to say is, as long as you're really just like giving it your best, and if you have the right attitude towards whatever you're doing, I feel like eventually you'll catch your break. Like you just have to stay committed, stay consistent, and be genuine and sincere, and I think it'll come. Yeah, so that's me.
That's the encouragement that I didn't know that I needed today.
Yeah.
Awesome. Aya?
Yeah, I don't really feel like my journey has ended or anything, but to get to where I am currently has been a long journey. There's no disputing that, but I'd be a liar if I didn't say that my journey didn't start with the School of Management. So with Jess Lumba really helped me a lot. I have to specifically give her a lot of props because when I was doing I was in my second year of uni, and I was really confused about what I wanted to do. But obviously I studied accounting and finance. So the main thing for me was just making sure that at the time I was studying accounting and finance with a year in industry, but I didn't really know if I wanted to fully go into accounting and finance. And I made that very clear to the careers team, who were till today like a godsend. So I remember at the time, they anything that they had, they would just always constantly send it to me. I would be at their office like every day, just asking what's new, showing them my CV, going through that. And then I remember, but I got a lot of rejections. I did a lot of interviews. It was crazy, but I never gave up. So I guess that was the first step to me, just like never giving up. And then I remember it got to summer of that year. So the exams had been finished, but I had to go back to Swansea to finish something off. And then Jess in the careers team sent me an application, sent me a job opening, year in industry opening for Capgemini. And I was like, well, it's not accounting and finance, but you know what? Let me just give it a try, give it a shot. And this was like July. So and uni was going to be back in September, and I had literally nothing. So, you know what, I was like, I'm going to apply. And to make matters worse, this was the London office too. So you can imagine how competitive it was going to be. But I was like, you know what, let me just give it a try, give it a shot. If it works, it doesn't work, I'll still try it. Lo and behold, I applied, got first round, second round. I think there was about 4 rounds. And then I finally got the job, and that was kind of where my career started. And that was what really was the first time I was like, you know what, I can actually kind of do this, like, especially when it comes to in my opinion, to the roles that were really competitive. So that's kind of where my journey started and how I feel like I got my foot into the door. And for me, it started with the School of Management. From there, I finished at Capgemini, and I was still like, do I want to do consulting? It wasn't really something I felt I really wanted to do. I wanted to do something a bit more technical that wasn't accounting, but was still finance. So I finished uni, was still in a bit of a, should I go back to Capgemini or should I just do something different? So for a year, I was like, no, I'm just going to just work in operations in a tech company and just kind of figure out from there. And then by about 9 months, I was like, you know what, I just somehow found out about insurance and more corporate insurance and how that kind of works. So that was how I was, you know what, that's what I'm going to do. It sounds super interesting. This is me. And from there, it was just like, you know what, all the skills that I had kind of built up from being in Swansea with the School of Management Careers team, and just how to make yourself have more of an edge, how to kind of present your CV, those were exactly the steps that I used to kind of, you know, make that leap. So I first off started within operations, and then about a year or so after, I moved more to pricing, which is, some might know it as actuarial sciences, where you're trying to figure out the prices of stuff, of actual insurance policies. And that's currently where I'm at now. So it's been about a 3-year journey to get to this point, but it's been a 3-year journey where I know where it started from. It literally started from me going to the School of Management every day, bugging them, asking them for help, you know, this and the other. And I feel like I'm still on the correct trajectory. God willing, fingers crossed, however you like to view it. But yeah, that's kind of my story. It's a story that's still being written. So it's hard for me. I don't want to like sound like it has an end, because it's still like it's en route. But yeah, that's me.
Wow. That is crazy amazing. I think it's crazy to think that. I think sometimes you have this thing in your head that like, I'm going to go to uni and then I'm going to apply for a job and then I'm going to get it because I applied, duh.
Plus one plus one plus one, right?
Right. And then it's going to be fine. Everything's hunky-dory. I start making money. I start living it up, and that's the end.
And then I have a Tesla in 5 years.
Exactly. And the reality is, it's this kind of, you know, journey. It's not quite straight. It looks very different for each person, and you make different choices along that. I guess part of this, obviously, with KTCG, Keep the Conversation Going, what we do like to talk about is, you know, race and some of the challenges that we faced within the BAME community. So just to kick that off, would you guys mind sharing, well, where you grew up? So where you're from, where you grew up, and what your ethnicity background is?
I can start. So as my name's Ayo, as I guess I've already introduced already, but if you do know or you don't know, I'm Nigerian, so I've got a Nigerian background. So I've lived through my short but long life, however you want to view it. I've lived in both. So I grew up in London, and then I also grew up in Nigeria for a few years also. So I've got about a bit of a dual background in that sense. And yeah, if in terms of the BAME bracket, I guess I sit as the Black African, or black, yeah, I'm essentially black. If you can't see that. So yeah, that's pretty much my background from an ethnicity perspective, point of view.
Awesome. Namil?
So I mean, I am Indian, but to be specific, I'm South Indian, because in India itself, there's a lot of different states and people are so different, and there's 1.3 billion people, so you can imagine. So yeah, I am South Indian, so I'm from a place called Kerala, but so my mother tongue is Malayalam. But then when I was 6 months old, I went to Saudi Arabia, so I grew up in Saudi for a while, during my childhood at least, and then I moved to Dubai for a bit, and then I moved back to Cochin, which is a place in Kerala, because my grandparents were ill and we just wanted to be close to the family. And then I did my higher secondary, like my 11th and 12th in Abu Dhabi, and then I went to uni. So yeah, that's my story.
Rachel?
Hi, it's Rachel, and I was grow up and born in China, and I just stayed in China until 20, and I study at Swansea University, and it's my 3rd year in the UK. Yeah, but I think for me, I was I have grown up in Guangzhou, which is near Hong Kong. So for my province, I speak both Mandarin and Cantonese. So yeah, that's
Whoa,
pretty
that's cool.
Thanks.
Right? Those business languages that employers always look for.
Right?
Yeah, both.
Cool.
Imagine having both. That's true.
Oh, that's great. It sounds like there's a lot of cultural background here that we can, get different perspectives. And one thing that I really want to know is, did you ever experience, like, maybe not experience, but did you ever have any discussions about your race or ethnicity as you were growing up? Was that something that you were aware of? Namil, maybe you can go first, seeing as you traveled a lot growing up.
I mean, honestly, just purely because of the countries that I was in, there were a lot of Indians in general. Like, it's funny, people do say this, but it's true because Indians are everywhere. Like, so you find home wherever you go. You know what I mean? So in a way that, so just like growing up, I didn't really know what was normal initially because I grew up abroad. So once I went back home, it started there. Like, I feel like that was the first time I felt like people were looking at me a little differently because I was an NRI, a non-resident Indian, right? So someone that's coming from abroad, and they're like, so that's viewed differently, right? And then once I went back to Dubai, again, I was viewed differently that since I'm from India, right? And then you go back to India, again, you're viewed as someone from Dubai rather than you're from India. You know what I mean? And then you travel to the UK, and then you really feel out of place initially. But then I think those experiences were great for me because I just learned how to fit in, like in a way that I understood the kind of people that I wanted to be with. Growing up, my parents always told me just like, you will attract the energy that you expend, and that's all that matters. So the people that did have an issue with, let's say, race or whatever, it wasn't exactly on my frequency, let's say, and it was never an issue for me because that's not the kind of energy that I wanted in my life anyway. So I guess that's, yeah, as long as you're just true to yourself, I feel like you will attract the right people and the right energy. Yeah.
That's a good message, especially what you said about about adapting. I think that's not always easy for a lot of students to do, especially when you're coming from abroad or you have just a different cultural background to the majority, and then having to fit in, to a completely different system culturally. That can be hard. But I like what you said about, expending the energy that you want to get in, because it's all about the vibes, right?
It's all about the vibes. That's what I was trying to say, actually.
Okay, so you guys, you grow up, at some point you decide you want to go to university, you end up at Swansea. Did you face any kind of discrimination when you were in Swansea? Did you ever encounter anything of the sorts? And I know that's a big question, so I'll give it a beat.
Okay. A bit of a heavy one.
I think Rachel wants to go first.
For me, I feel I'm really lucky. I haven't any discrimination experience at Swansea University. I feel everyone is really nice because of the diversity. There are a lot of people have different backgrounds, so everyone just respect other culture. But I have heard that some of my friends maybe like have that kind of experience. It's not really horrible, but it's just like someone shouted at him just like for no reason. Sometimes we don't really understand what they're talking about and for what reason, but I mean, it definitely a horrible experience. It just like someone hurt you, but for no reasons. But I think Swansea, the life in Swansea is really good for me because I haven't had that kind of experience. But yeah, that's pretty much from my side.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you never faced any of the discrimination. I think I've had several of my friends as well be, shouted at on the street or as they were walking, and it's just one of those things that you don't wish on anyone. So.
Yeah, definitely.
For me, coming to Swansea, so I feel like at the time I came to Swansea, so by the time the Swansea that the way Swansea was when I first was there, and the Swansea that was there when I left, I feel like they were two different places. So when I first came to Swansea, Swansea was still it wasn't a lot of people that looked like me were not really going there because, you know, the perception is South Wales. It's like towards the right at the end of Wales, in essence. And there was just a natural preconception that why would I go all the way over there when I could probably go to, let's say, a Cardiff, or I could go to, like, there's so many universities that you could go to before you think of going to Swansea. But as things started to change, as the Bay campus was built, just so many things that kind of developed, that the university just evolved and just changed. So with that in mind, when I first came into Swansea, and there was a few of us, not a lot, especially how it was by the time I left and how it is probably now, there wasn't that much. So naturally there was, how do I put it? It wasn't ideal, and you kind of had to carry yourself with a chip on your shoulder, because in your head you kind of viewed yourself as a minority. So naturally you want to constantly have yourself in a place where if anything goes wrong, you can kind of, if it's, you know, in a worst case scenario, you can protect yourself, but you don't want a situation to ever go left. So I feel like in that essence, just being a minority, it kind of would shape your mind and shape how you actually adapt to your environment. You're not as comfortable as you'd probably like to be, but some people can adapt, others can't. So for me, I was lucky. I was able to adapt very quickly, regardless of the ethnicity or the race or religion. I was always able to just interact with everybody, but it wasn't the case for everybody. So I want to speak for another person's perspective at that time, but I can speak for mine, and I can say that, yeah, it was good. I had a great time in terms of race. I didn't feel like anybody necessarily really pushed that button, but I know there were situations where that happened, and there were people that had felt like they needed to, defend themselves in those moments, especially because of how enclosed the area really is. So yeah, I would say that was kind of my experience at the time.
Yeah. Namil?
I mean, so for me, once I got to Swansea, like when it comes to Swansea University in itself, I feel like, again, I was also lucky enough to not really be called out on certain instances. But at the same time, I feel like racial bias or discrimination is so systemic that it can be just glances, it can be just looks, it can be a lot of things, right? So it can be anything that makes you feel out of place. So of course, like I feel like as an international student, I have felt that. But at the same time, I know for a fact, like I said, I didn't really let it affect me. But then there was a couple of instances that wasn't in Swansea University, but then I used to play for this Sunday league football team every Sunday, and I think there was one specific instance where like it actually happened. Like, so you're in the middle of the game, I'm an attacker, so the defender tries to get under your skin, tries to like rough you up a little bit physically, and all of that's fine. But then suddenly he did say something, and like I remember at that moment I felt okay in a sense where I understood that it wasn't my fault. Instead of saying anything back, instead of retaliating, at least in my head, I knew what I had to do, which was score a goal and win the game, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I did, and I was happy with that result. But at the same time, I knew for a fact what he was trying to essentially do was get under my skin, throw me off, and I didn't let any of that happen to me, and I essentially just took his power away. So
yes, sir.
So essentially, nothing changed, and whatever he tried to do didn't work. So. I think it's really important. I mean, again, I'm literally just talking for myself. Like Ayo said, it's so important to specify that, because so many people have so many different experiences. And to me, that was just the way I dealt with things. And it was only because of the way I was brought up. It was only because of the way that I look at things, where I think it's really up to you how to react. And everything you do is fair and is valid. Whatever you're feeling is completely valid. and it's just up to who you are as a person and how you respond. And there's nothing wrong when something like this happens, because it's so systemic and it requires radical change. And I was just so lucky that I never really felt that at university or at my home. Like, so in that way, I was really lucky. And it was just like one instance. So as a result of that, it was fine. And another thing is, people in Swansea are extremely nice. Like, it's crazy. People in Wales are so nice. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, you cross over and you go to London, and like, it's a completely different continent for some reason. You know what I mean? And like, people don't smile in England for some reason. You know. So as a result, that's another reason why I was really glad that I was in Swansea Uni. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I think that's the thing that we've heard multiple times from different people who've come on here, that I don't think there's ever been something that's extreme like that was like, this is blatantly racist.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you're not even
Yeah.
trying to hide it.
Yeah.
I suppose some things, you know, like you said, they're just so deeply ingrained that it's almost like a reflex. To do things like that. But I'm glad that you guys don't have like crazy, terrible experiences. But clearly, I guess with everything, there's always room for improvement. Moving on from that, so you finish, you've experienced whatever you've experienced at Swansea, had a great time, you graduate, you move into a different place. Have you, since leaving Swansea, experienced any discrimination of any sort where you are right now, or even just anywhere outside of Swansea that you've spent time in?
When you're outside the place that, let's say, you're born in or grew up in, I feel like there's always going to be some level of discrimination, like, or bias, let's say. And the only thing that can genuinely beat that is like skill or knowledge or intellect. And the thing is, at times discrimination is nonsensical. That's the problem, where there's no reason for it and they can't justify it, right? And that's when there's a red flag. But until then, so you just have to get it to a point where you're like, I'm completely qualified for this, so why am I not selected, right? And then that red flag becomes noticed, right? So in general, like I said, just after uni, it was all about doing my best. And as long as I did that, I knew for a fact, even if I had to compensate for certain things, right? So there's like there are pay gaps here just because of the power of your passport, let's say, right? So if you're an Indian, you can literally just get paid a lot less purely because you're Indian, right? And there are like advantages that comes with nationality and diversity that a company has to maintain. So there are things like that as well. For the exact same job that somebody else might be doing, they might be getting paid more just because of their nationality. But that's the thing. So at the end of the day, it really depends on your attitude, at least for me. And if you're learning, if you're absorbing the same level of knowledge, it really depends. It's all up to you. So you control the things that you can control, right? And as long as that's everything that you can do and that's everything that you can be, there's nothing more that you can do. But when it comes to, I tell you where I really felt as though, like, let's say as an international student in the UK, right? Up until the 2-year extension thing, you had 6 months, right? And in 6 months, you had to get a job. And it would be fine if you could apply to all the companies, but you can't. You can only apply to the companies that can avail sponsorships. And that is a handful. And how many of the international students actually get through that? Very, very few. So I feel like just because of where you're born, so there is a level of discrimination there, I would say, because there it's really not just about everything that you are, everything that you studied, everything that you've accomplished. It's also like chance and luck as well. And when that comes into play, you can't really depend on luck, right? So I feel like there is that. And I felt like I could control my future a little bit more if I came back here and if I went back to India. So that's another reason why, because now after this 2 years of experience, I know for a fact if I go back to the UK, I know exactly where my value is. I know exactly how resourceful I can be. And as a result of that, when I do apply for these jobs, I'm hopefully planning on coming back for masters. I know for a fact being an international student isn't like as important as it would be when you're just after undergrad. You know what I mean? Because you have work experience under your belt and you have a master's, or that work experience really defines things for you, I suppose. Yeah.
As an international student, I think it's just nice to hear.
Yeah.
Rachel, would you like to go next? Have you experienced any kind of discrimination since you left Swansea or in other places?
Well, for me, as I'm living in my apartment to study my master degree, so just taking online course, so I think I haven't had like that much opportunity to go out to experience that. So
Been in lockdown.
Yeah, in the lockdown. So I haven't that experience, but I have a sense that as a foreigner, as an international student, it's really hard to get the job here in the UK, much harder than the local student, definitely. Because of, I think it's just because they have less position for us due to the visa problems, and we have to work harder to get the equal opportunity. But I just feel if we can't change the situation, then we just work harder to prove ourselves. That's fine. Yeah, that's what I feel. So I just need to be the best self to prove that we have the equal capability to stay here. So that's pretty much that's what I think, and that's what I do.
Yeah, I like that. Both you and Namil spoke about, being confident in yourselves and knowing your skills and just being confident in your capabilities. And I really like that. I think that's so important for us students to know that we are as equally deserving, as equally capable of getting these roles, even though it's a little bit harder. Thankfully, we now have the 2-year visa, but still, that still costs money. So, for a lot of us, it's still that 6 months that we have afterwards. So, that's really encouraging. Thanks to you too.
So I guess your answer is from my perspective is twofold. So directly, I wouldn't say I've experienced any form of, like, let's say, what's the word, discrimination. But on paper, yes. So obviously, as I've developed and gone into different buildings and started to, like, as my career has developed and I've been able to kind of just be in different environments, it's hard for me to not notice that I'm always the only person that it looks like me. So when I kind of think about that, it naturally just start to think, you know what? I then start to look at the data of, well, how many people that look like me are actually within these industries? In my example, in my position, that would be insurance, financial services. How many people that look like me? And when you compare it to the other, ethnicities, you would say that it's very much, it's like, let's say 1 Black person to every 10 white people, or every maybe 5 Asian. So it's when you think about that, you naturally think that I've not naturally experienced any form of discouragement, but the lack of people that look like me is in itself an example of being discriminated, or it's discouraging, because if you don't see someone that looks like you won't feel like you're capable, maybe because of the skin or the tone of your skin. So in that essence, I would say I felt it, and it's something that naturally you start to overthink. You start to feel, maybe, am I doing the right thing here? I have to be I think someone mentioned it before, you start to feel like you need to do 5 to 10 times the work just to feel worthy of being in the environment. So in that essence, and when you really break down, what that means, you start to feel like this isn't normal. And, this is a very nuanced, it's not black and white. You don't just say, hey, treated me this way, you've not discouraged me, you've not discriminated. No, it's a lot more deeper and a lot more deep-rooted. It's if I was to an extent, give some sort of hypothesis of it. It's something that can't be changed tomorrow or with or some sort of policy change today. It starts with 10 years. That's how I feel like things can really be felt. That's how the change can really be magnified or really be, to an extent felt, So in essence, just to kind of, because I feel like I've said quite a bit there, directly, I don't feel like I've been discriminated. I've had very difficult situations, just like anybody of any race would experience within their career. But in a more nuanced and a more deep-rooted sense, I do feel like there's an element of discrimination, because the data proves that if it's not discrimination, it must be something.
Yeah.
So that would be my 2 pence on that.
Yeah, that's something that Namil, you mentioned earlier as well, the systemic racism that happens in institutions that we have to face in corporate or wherever we go in any institution, really. And as students, combining that with all the movements that have been happening, BLM, hashtag Islamophobia or Stop Islamophobia, and Stop Asian Hate as well. If you think about all of that, and how to deal with it, Ayo, you mentioned earlier, sometimes it feels like there's a chip on your shoulder. And even though you might not be facing discrimination, someone a family member, a close friend, a colleague might be experiencing that. We know for a fact that we have students at Swansea University who may have faced hate crimes or discrimination. What kind of advice would you give to a student who has either faced that or is really worried about going into the world right now with all these movements happening to try and stop these racial hate crimes from happening?
To be very honest, I do not have the answer to that, because that's a very loaded question. I'm not facing life where I feel like I give the answer to that. But the one thing I could definitely say is it's important to have a sense of self and a sense of, it's harder than me just telling you to have a sense of self. It's something you have to build over years. You need to have people that actually, which is why I say this is a very difficult question to answer. But what I would do is, it's gonna sound incredibly bad and very but it's what's worked for me to an extent. It's just to an extent, desensitize yourself to and it's to the extent where you desensitize yourself from the bad and the good. And what I mean from the bad is everything that you mentioned as a precursor to the question as to what will contribute to, be it the hate crime. Don't let that be a measure of who you believe you are, because you are who you believe you are. Like you define that by yourself. Who you want to be and who you currently are is what you tell you. Yeah, if that makes sense. If you can figure that out, it does make sense. And then from the good aspect is, I can't just say desensitize yourself from the bad. Also, you have to desensitize yourself from the good, because it's human instinct to get to think too highly of ourselves. So you have to also do that, because those type of things tend to affect people when they actually go into their career. So I think it's just having that balance of, when it comes to any form of racial insensitivity or injustice, or someone saying that you're this, you're that because of how you look, just desensitize yourself from it. Report it where you can, definitely report it, because everybody has to be held accountable for their bad decisions. So definitely report it, but you personally have to learn to just try and desensitize, because if not, it could be a bad thing carry for the rest of your career or the rest of your life. So definitely do that. Same thing on the good side too, because you don't want to be in a position where you feel like you're too big for your boots. I'm a big believer. Everybody has to constantly feel like they're learning something and like striving for something. So yeah, that's my 2 pence. Might be wrong. It's an opinion. It's what's worked for me. Yeah, everybody has a different perspective. Cool.
Yeah, I think what you said about having a sense of self there is really important, and that can often lead you to a position where you then actually are able to block out everything else. You can still feel for whatever's happening. You can still empathize with different people that are experiencing it, but because you have a sense of self, you're able to put one foot in front of the other and just say, okay, I have to do what I have to do, because my success means success for everyone else. That's just what we experience as BAME. The BAME community is, when we succeed, we create more open doors for everyone else to succeed who looks just like us. So I think sense of self is really important.
So I do agree that. So for me, I think I would encourage people to never undervalue yourself. You just believe who you are. You don't need to just truly believe who you are in your heart and do what you want, even though you might have some horrible experience. But it doesn't mean we need to unrespect people. We just do what we usually do, respect everyone, because I think it has 99.99% of people are very nice, so we don't need to worry about that. That those kind of people who have special thoughts on it. So yeah, that's my sense.
Yeah, that's really important as well. I think even to add to what you're saying in terms of being able to value yourself is valuing others as well in the process. I remember, Rachel, you and I met in a group scenario. We had group work together, and we got in touch because I was like, oh, this is, Rachel, and she was a little quiet. Let me make sure everything was okay. And just, you and I speaking and, getting to move forward from there, because I was willing to take the time to be like, hey, this is my friend Rachel.
Yeah, I'm so appreciate that.
But yeah, I think if more of us were to be able to just listen and value us, value each other, excuse me, I think that would help as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I think according to me, one of the things that I realized over the last year is genuinely the power of social media. Like especially when it comes to acts of this nature, just the support that you gather, just like the people that empathize with you and resonate with you and actually support you. At the end of the day, these things really don't define you. As long as you understand that, as long as yeah, I mean, I agree with both of them. Like those are exactly the points that I think as well. But what really works for me, at least, is this is again just from my perspective, is I have the tendency to rationalize things, and I tend to be very logical. So when you think about these things logically and rationally, right, it really does not make sense. And when it doesn't make sense, you kind of understand that it's really not your fault. Like you are not the reason for what happened, right? And then when you kind of trace that back to how you feel, you understand, you actually end up empathizing with the other person, because you realize how or what might have happened to them, that they grew up in, whatever circumstance, and the way they grew up and what caused them to say it. Like, and that's what happened to me, at least. And I realized that helps me, because it helps me empathize, but at the same time, it does not make me feel any less than what I am at any point, right? So as long as, again, sense of self, as well as understanding your value, it's just very important that, like, you can speak out, just understanding that you have people around you, understanding that you do have the support as well. Yeah. So I think, yeah, and social media, like I said, I feel like just last year when it came to the BLM movement, you really truly understood the power of it, like the way it extended over countries and continents and ethnicities. Everybody was gathering, right? And you just have to believe, you have to trust that you have your own people and they're there for you. And as long as you confide, as long as you voice it, like I feel like it has to be, if you want radical change, it has to start with acting out. Like you do need to do something about it. And like I said, whether it's reporting it, whether it's talking to a friend about it, whether it's just voicing it or acting on it, I think that's good enough now, because so many people resonate, so many people empathize, and you're not alone at any point. And that's all that you need to remember, I feel. Yeah.
Yeah. I think even to that, I'll add what Karen said in our last episode. She said, it's not a good enough reason to not go for something simply because you think that there'll be discrimination or you think that people won't like you. It's just not a good enough reason. So whatever it is to keep going. And I guess from what you guys are saying, the thing that has pulled you through is ultimately knowing that you are enough, and the only thing that you can do is control who you are and who you present yourself to be. And I think that's a big take home thing for all of us.
Yeah.
But just to pick your brains here, so that we also be somewhat solution driven, is there any support that you think would have been helpful or even would be helpful right now for students to have while they're navigating this racially charged climate that the university could implement? And this could be something maybe that you've seen being implemented in your workplace, or just, I know, some brilliant idea you've been cooking up over the past year. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but if you do have something, I mean, feel free to just unmute and go.
I think, so I mean, this is not being implemented here or anything, but I think one thing that I've been talking to a lot of people about is just normalizing mental health and normalizing talking to a therapist, literally. Just understanding that there's no stigma around that. And from a place like from India, let's say, there's so much stigma around it, as in mental health isn't real, like this is what they do, this is literally what they do. And just not believing that it can actually have detrimental effect on all aspects of your life, and just normalizing that. And honestly, I think all of us, every single person could use therapy, not because you're sick, just because it'll make you feel better and just because it'll help you in a way or the other. I think that is something. And so, for example, Swansea Uni could definitely have a counselor where you actually have a session in a way that, you know, if it's just knowing that there's someone there that you can talk to. And that's why I think therapy is so important, because they're literally qualified and that is their livelihood, to actually understand, empathize, and give you the correct solutions, especially when it comes to dilemmas, when it comes to problems, anything when it comes to mental health. And I think that's something that Swansea Uni could possibly do, especially for kids at uni, because everybody's dealing with different issues. And feel like just having that avenue where they can actually go and talk their feelings and talk to someone about it, I think would be really healthy. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I would suggest that have more activities or have more conversations. I really remember the conversation Chido and I have, like outside where is it, in the School of Management. It really make a difference for me and start our friendship. I hope, I don't know, in some ways, if the people can have that kind of opportunity, really important for them to have someone to speak, especially in the first year I came to the UK and I feel lonely, or in some way I don't know how to make friends. I feel it's really important to feel supported in some way from the university, to have more like conversation in some way. I don't know how to decide that, but I feel from my personal experience, I feel is so much important for me. Yeah. Your support to do. It's really important.
I'm glad it made a difference.
Yeah, definitely.
And lastly, Aya.
So for me, just to kind of put myself in the position of a solution kind of, driver. So I think I mentioned in my last point about having a sense of self. So for me, I remember being in university and not having that sense of self. I was kind of riding my luck, and obviously I believe in the divine. So things like that, all in all, kind of contributed for me to. But that lack of sense of self, I feel like it's something I just recently got, and I feel like one important way to kind of get that is kind of building the alumni network to an extent. So for someone like you guys who are, two females who are Black, Black females, like in your head, I don't know if you feel like this, hopefully you don't feel like this, a lot of females who are Black or who have whatever color of, whatever color they might be, they might naturally have a feeling that, oh, am I worthy? All of those kind of things. But you kind of just naturally will have that because of just how the world has just kind of been set up. But if you have someone that looks just like you, talks like you, thinks like you, and is in where you want to be, and can literally, you have direct access to that exact person, I feel like for a lot of people, they can build that sense of self that they are lacking, especially when they're in that university, especially to the tail end of their, university career. So for me, and it's something that even for me, it's just because I have the time, but it's just how to do it, how to kind of reach back out. It's like, I have the time. If someone who went to my university just messaged me on LinkedIn or whatever, that, hey, they needed some help with, what they want to do, they see that I'm doing something similar, but I understand being in university and not wanting to really reach out in that sense. But if there was that direct link, it's just to build confidence that, what, I can do this. What, in quotes, the barriers to entry, which tend to be in my head, my race, if you can build it into, a university student, especially in their penultimate final years, I feel like that would make a hell of a difference, and it can build that drive that naturally would tends to wane because of that feeling of not being good enough or not being, So for me personally, that's something that I believe is, should be kind of thought about a lot more. And to an extent, I'm kind of putting myself out there. If someone messages me from the university and says, hey, look, I want to, go into insurance, I don't have all the answers. I will be very honest, I'm still figuring it out. But in whatever way I know I can help, I would always 150% want to help. Or if it's just someone that just studied the same course as me and doesn't want to be boxed in, things like that. Because I remember how it felt in that time. So yeah, those are kind of the things that I would think. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. Those are brilliant. Those are brilliant ideas. And I think it's something that I know definitely the School of Management and people within the university are trying to work on. But I suppose, as they watch these videos, listen to some of our feedback, I think the Swansea that other people after us are going to experience hopefully is going to be significantly different. And hopefully we'll get to a point where conversations like this aren't a need, but are just part of daily life and are really just to improve people's experiences. And yeah, I guess with that, we will wrap this up. Thank you so much for being with us, sharing your insights. I've personally learned a lot.
So much.
I've also been very, very encouraged just to hear about how you guys have navigated moving out of uni, which is crazy because you're adults now, and really navigating, and in my opinion, absolutely flourishing. If there's anyone out there, if you feel like you need to talk to someone or you just need to reach out to someone, please do email somexperience@swansea.ac.uk, and you can speak to a student's experience officer who can link you up with the person that you need to. And hopefully as time goes on, there will be many, many more services available to help you. I guess we will conclude that. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe, smile, be kind to people. And that's that.
Until next time, everyone. Bye.